If we compile the list of the most recognizable vehicles on the road today, the Subaru Forester is most certainly one of them. Over the last 10 years and 2 generations, Subaru really hasn't made a lot of changes to one of their best-selling models. Subaru owners prefer tradition, and they don't respond well to major changes. Well, for 2025, we have an all-new generation with a completely different look, new technology, and in my opinion, for under $35,000, you have a great value here with the premium trim. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the 2025 Forester Premium. We're going to see what this vehicle is all about, what it's giving you compared to last generation, and also to see why, if you are looking at buying a new crossover this year, and maybe you owned a Forester in the past, you might really like what the 2025 Forester Premium is offering. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Subaru of Wakefield in Wakefield, Massachusetts for letting me come down here to check out the all-new Forester. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Subaru inventory. And speaking of inventory, Subaru of Wakefield is home to the largest selection of Subarus in New England. If you are looking at buying a 2025 Forester, they have plenty of them on the lot as I speak. So let's begin with pricing. The model we have today, of course, is the Premium, coming in at $32,000 and sits between the base and sport in the lineup, much like last generation. You can opt for an additional package which comes in at $1,200, where you are going to have blind spot detection, reverse automatic braking, and a power liftgate. Personally, I would opt for that package just for better safety and also overall value. Now, when you take a look at the Forester from the outside, yes, the cosmetic changes are significant. But believe it or not, when it comes to dimensions, not much has changed. In fact, it's only a ½ inch longer and a ½ inch wider. So if you are somebody who loves a vehicle of this size, the 2025 model won't really require any learning curve when you're hopping in behind the wheel for the first time. Also unchanged is the ground clearance, which for all Foresters that do not wear the Wilderness badge, you're going to have 8.7 inches of ground clearance, giving you some great off-road capability and versatility, but also up here in New England, year-round versatility when you are encountering snow-covered roadways. But ultimately, it's going to be this redesign that will draw your attention, especially for the exterior, and it's likely why you're here, because you want to get acclimated with the 2025 Forester. So let's begin with the front fascia. You have completely redesigned LED steering responsive headlights, which do come standard across all trims for 2025. However, if you do want LED turn signals, you have to go higher up in the trim levels, much like we see with the Subaru WRX. And that is something I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of moving forward on this platform. You're also going to have LED fog lights as well for better visibility at night. With those headlights, they do make their way into the front grille, giving you the shield effect, as Subaru calls it. And ultimately, it gives this vehicle a Outback-like design. And I think we're going to see this characteristic make its way across other Subarus in the near future. But more importantly though, the longer I look at this Forester, the more I see some design elements from prior generations, not from 10 years ago, but rather 20 years ago with the second and third generation Forester. You see that with the flatter hood, and you have more of a squared off design, which even though it's still a crossover, it has more of this station wagon-like or car-like appearance that I think a lot of Forester enthusiasts are most certainly going to love. For the lower portion of the front bumper, you're also going to have plastic cladding and molding, giving you that rugged aesthetic, but also I can definitely tell what a Wilderness trim will look like for this generation in the upcoming years. Then as you make your way over to the side profile, you have more pronounced body lines that are more aggressive and squared off. Again, something that we're going to see a lot more of from Subaru in the future, because this gives you that rugged aesthetic. And for a premium, this is pretty impressive to see. Also remolded cladding for the wheel arches and side profile for the lower portion of the doors. And it definitely gives you this cool and adventurous look, which I think a lot of Forester owners are going to appreciate. Another cosmetic feature that we're seeing a lot more of from Subaru as of late is the gloss gray accents for the side mirror caps, giving you a nice color contrast on this model. And as I mentioned before, you can get blind spot detection with that optional package. Wrapping up the side profile, with the Premium, you are going to have 17-inch alloy wheels, but on higher trims, you can go with 18s or 19s. But if you want the optimal amount of comfort, the 17s are definitely going to give you that for sure, especially with this retuned Subaru global platform that underpins this model. And then lastly, for a lot of you who have owned Foresters way back 20 years ago, you're going to love the fact that the C-pillars are thinner, with a symmetrical all-wheel drive badge being stamped there rather than the rear fascia. And then as we make our way around to the back, there's some really cool aesthetics here for the 2025 Forester, such as the Forester name being stamped into the rear liftgate. And that is a trend that we're now seeing in the automotive industry and gives the Forester a completely different look than last generation. The Subaru badge is grayed out, and we only saw that for models with the Onyx edition trim with the Outback and Ascent. So Subaru is moving away from chrome accents, and we saw that up front. So I'm glad to see that Subaru is starting to be a bit more risky, but also more fun as well with their designs. Then you have gloss black accents that run the length of the rear fascia and connect into the redesigned taillights that are thinner and less vertically shaped like we saw in previous generations. Lastly, you are going to have aggressive cladding for the rear bumper, just like last generation, and better yet, just like we saw for the outgoing Forester, you are going to have a physical exhaust outlet, which I know a lot of you are definitely going to love, because brands now have embraced fake vents, fake exhausts, and are usually tucking those exhaust outlets underneath the bumper. It's also the rear third that ties everything together for the 2025 model, where even though dimension-wise it's not much different than the outgoing model, it does have more of a station wagon-like road presence and demeanor that Subaru has been very successful with over the last 30 years. Under the hood, you are going to have a naturally aspirated 2.5-liter boxer 4-cylinder engine, producing 180 horsepower and 178 pound-feet of torque, and it is paired with a CVT, much like last generation. While a number of you are going to point out the fact that we do lose 2 horsepower but gain 2 pound-feet of torque, keep in mind that Subaru did retune this engine to give us better max torque on the low end. So when you are driving in the city and suburbs, the Forester should be quicker to respond. And speaking of response, Subaru did retune the CVT as well to better mimic gear shifts. It will mimic an 8-speed automatic transmission. As we saw with the Crosstrek, the Outback, the Legacy, and the Ascent, you're going to notice that this CVT performs far more smoothly than in the past and for the last generation Forester. Hopping inside the Forester, you are greeted by a plethora of changes that most certainly makes the premium trim for 2025 a lot more appealing and enticing than the outgoing generation. Let's just start off with what is standard for 2025. You get an 11.6-inch touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility to go along with 3-level heated seats and dual-zone climate control. The 3-level heated seats and dual-zone climate control were not available for the premium trim last year, so you're going to love that for sure when you're hopping into a vehicle under $35,000. You also get a wireless phone charging pad, and standard is a panoramic moonroof. This is all really great stuff to have here that, in a way, maybe you don't want to spend the extra for a Sport or a Limited. But I do think, though, when you start looking at the features that Subaru is integrating, you're definitely going to love the Limited and Touring, especially with the ultra suede trim seats and, of course, the digital rear view mirror and top view camera helping you park this vehicle. But more importantly, what has made a great first impression is the interior quality and the fact that Subaru focused on giving you soft touch materials throughout the interior, such as on the dashboard, the center console where you have a nice area to rest your legs, also soft touch padding on the door panels and the armrest, and then restyled front seats that are more aggressive, but they provide more support and better bolstering. And you're going to see that across the board for Forester trims for 2025. For the front driver's seat, it will be power adjustable, giving you more customizability and help you find the ideal seating position, whereas the passenger side will be manually adjustable only for the premium trim. Another minor detail that will most certainly go overlooked is the new gear shift knob that once again removes this gloss black look that we had for the interior last generation in other Subarus. And whether it's the interior or the exterior, there's not a lot of chrome accents and there's not a lot of gloss black. So Subaru is definitely listening to where consumer sentiment is, where we don't want to have that gloss black because it's difficult to clean. They've kept it very simple, but they've given you an interior that looks higher quality and most certainly is upscale and, better yet, easier to clean with some of the plastic materials that they used. Then taking a glance in front of you, nothing too different compared to the 2024 Forester. You're still going to have an information display in between your analog gauges, a tilt and telescopic steering column with buttons mounted on the steering wheel that control that information display. Also buttons for your volume and tuning, for your radio presets. And then on the right side, you're going to find your adaptive cruise control, your lane centering, and the SI drive modes. For that information display, you can scroll through a variety of information such as outside temperature, time, and your digital speedometer, of course, your range, and the tire pressure monitoring system. So gives you a nice variety of information to work with, especially when you are on those longer road trips. So let's take a more in-depth look at this 11.6-inch touchscreen, which is all new for the Forester nameplate, but we find this in other vehicles across the Subaru lineup. And that way, when you are hopping into this vehicle for the first time, you're acclimated with this new screen. So up top, you are going to have a physical button for your hazards, physical dials for the volume and tuning, physical buttons for your front and rear defrosters, and dual zone climate control, which can be accessed at the bottom of the screen with your AC and air circulation buttons, and of course where you want that fan to be blowing, and of course the fan speed, and 3-level heated seats. At the bottom of the screen, you're going to find a number of different icons. In the center will be your home screen button. To the left will be your auto start stop, which is great to see because in older Subarus with this head unit, that was embedded in a menu. So I'm glad it's all within arm's reach and that's easy to access. Next to that will be your auto vehicle hold. And then on the far left will be your vehicle settings tab. And here you have a number of different menus. One for your X mode. So with the Premium, you do not get dual function X mode. So no deep snow or mud for this trim. You have to go higher up in the trim levels for 2025 to receive that. You can also adjust the steering responsive headlights. I would leave that on. You can also turn off the auto start stop feature from this screen as well. Then for the driving assistance features, you can keep the pre-collision braking on or turn that off. I will keep that on if this is going to be your family vehicle. You can also adjust the forward collision warning system, whether you want it at normal, far, or near. I keep it at normal. It's not too aggressive in that way. And then the lane departure warning, you can adjust the warning systems for that as well. And then lastly, on the more settings tab, you can adjust the units of measurement and the warning volume. I would put it on low, having owned a Subaru in the past. I would keep it on low because Subaru is very aggressive about that with audible sounds. Then on the bottom right, you are going to have the icon that leads you to your wireless connectivity for your smartphone and Android devices. And then lastly would be your driver profile icon, which I gotta be honest, isn't really necessary to have for the Premium, mostly because you do not have memory seats or the memory side mirrors. If you do have more than one driver in the family and you buy a Touring, that's gonna be more useful. You're gonna notice that having more driver profiles is gonna be more useful for that trim over a Premium such as this. Then just like with the Starlink multimedia display for last generation, whether it was a 6 or 8-inch touchscreen, you are going to have quick access icons that can be removed or added to minimize button clutter or just to give you easier access to some of your favorite settings, or maybe even when you are using some apps that you want to use, you can place that on this screen. Up top, and this is actually a big one for the Forester, unlike other models, because with the last generation Forester, you had a multicolor information display above the infotainment system. All of that is now moved to the top of this screen. So as you can tell, if you have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto connected to the screen, that will show at the top of this infotainment system. Then scrolling to the right, you have your water temperature, oil temperature, and average speed limit. Your outside weather for the next few hours. And then lastly will be your X mode button, which you can easily access immediately. So that way if you encounter snow or some dirt roads, you can turn that on very conveniently. As always, you will have a rear backup camera with trajectory, and as I mentioned earlier, with the optional package, you will get reverse automatic braking for the Premium. Beneath the head unit, you are going to notice a USB-C input, which that is new for this generation. We did not have that for the 2024 Forester, and also that will supplement the USB-A. Then to round out the front seating area, you are going to have a nice storage compartment for some smaller items, such as a couple smartphones, wallets, and maybe even some other smaller items as well. So this is a nice deep storage compartment. Now moving on to the second row, this is where not much has changed. In fact, when it comes to interior space, Subaru managed to keep this at 39.5 inches of legroom. You're also going to have plenty of headroom as well, and it's still family friendly. This would be the nice upgrade over the Crosstrek, and I still think this is more family friendly than the Outback, but some people will dispute that, especially since I brought that up a number of times on this channel throughout the years. Now, I adjusted the seat most of the way back. It's also somewhat on a recline, and I have plenty of legroom. When you are looking at buying a vehicle in this market and you want to make sure that it's going to fit your family, the Forester is definitely one of those crossovers, especially at this price point, that gives you that interior space, and you can now accommodate people of all shapes and sizes. Then moving on to the center seat, you are going to have some great placements for your feet. This is a bit surprising, and I feel as though it's a bit different compared to last generation. The center hump is not necessarily aggressive, but it will take away from legroom and a bit of shoulder room. But I still think you can actually fit a third person in the center, which for a lot of compact crossovers in this market, you just can't say the same for. So that is great to see that Subaru was able to retain the interior quality of the second row. And then finally, on the driver's side, this seat is adjusted to someone of my height, around 5'5", and I have plenty of legroom here where I can just sit back, relax, and enjoy the driving experience. Also, another thing too that I want to point out here about the 2025 Forester is that with the interior lighting, it's all LED. So I noticed that immediately walking in, not only for up front, but also the rear as well. And that lighting will definitely help out when you are loading the kids up late at night on a road trip. Also back here, you are going to have two rear air vents, but one thing that is new is that we now have a USB-C input back here along with a USB-A outlet. And then rounding out the front seating area, you are going to get a center armrest with two cup holders. Then as we make our way around to the back once again for the Forester, as I mentioned earlier, we do not have a power liftgate on this Premium, but that is optional. And inside, behind the second row seat, you're looking at right around 29.5 cubic feet of room, which does go unchanged compared to the outgoing generation. I was able to fit all my camera gear today, no problem. So that's 3 bags of camera gear, a gimbal box, and a tripod. And I have a lot more room to stack up items as well, making this very pet-friendly compared to other crossovers in this segment and price range. Now, there are a few things that are new for the 2025 model year, but you now have 4 hook placements that you can tie down items back here. That will definitely go a long way if you are going on a road trip or you're going off-road. Also, they changed where you have the LED lights, which are now on the tailgate, and that gives you more lighting late at night. So like I said before, if you are camping or maybe you are on that road trip and it's darker, you need to store things back here, you can have that better visibility for sure. Then with the second row seats folded, you're looking at right around 75 cubic feet of room, again matching what we had here last year for the Forester. So overall, very practical, very family friendly, and suitable if you are looking at buying a vehicle of this size at around $35,000. Beneath the floor mat, you are going to have a spare tire, so if you encounter a flat on your road trips or travels, you can fix that and be back on the road. Lastly, as we saw for last generation, you do get a rear cargo cover, which will keep all your valuable items out of sight. So if you are like me and you have camera gear or anything else of value, you can leave them back here and have that peace of mind knowing that no one will be able to peek in and steal what you have. And now that we've gone over everything for the 2025 Forester, let's take it out for a quick test drive to see how it performs. A 10% increase in torsion rigidity, a revised 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, and also a retuned CVT highlight the mechanical aspects for the 2025 Forester. But do you feel any of those changes? Well, we're going to find out on this test drive. So far, being behind the wheel for about 5 to 10 minutes, I'm noticing some major improvements, not necessarily in regards to straight line speed, but rather the overall refinement. It's not just the better interior insulation. It's not just the ride quality with this revised chassis. It's also the smoothness of this powertrain and CVT. Now, yes, with it being a CVT, there will be some droning. However, it's much more minimalized than last year. You get mimicked gear shifts with this revised CVT. Also, you feel that low-end torque kick in, especially when you are getting on the highway or you're going to be passing slower drivers. I noticed that this powertrain performs much more smoothly than it did in the past, and it's more refined. There's not as much noise coming from that 2.5. Another thing, too, that really stands out to me, of course, is the interior quality. And with that torsion rigidity, you're also going to get that quieter cabin, and you certainly feel that. But also the way the interior is laid out and designed, this feels more upscale for a premium trim. Last year with the Premium, it did feel pretty basic, I'm not gonna lie, because you didn't have the multicolor information display up top. It felt more analog being behind the wheel. Whereas for 2025 with this trim, I feel like Subaru knocked it out of the park a bit, where you don't necessarily have to spend over $35,000 to get the Sport, to get the Limited, to get the Touring if you are on that stricter budget. At around $32,000, you're getting all you could possibly want and then some. Not only do you get the better technology, but you also get the interior quality that Subaru really didn't necessarily have to throw into this vehicle for such a low trim, but it's most certainly welcomed. Let's get back on the highway so I can demonstrate this 2.5. And of course, when you are heading into the corners, you are going to have a very light steering, very typical from Subaru. Also, there will be some body roll, especially since we do have the 8.7 inches of ground clearance. One thing I do want to take note of, though, is that with this revised chassis, with that stiffness to the rigidity, you're going to feel that with the Sport. Subaru's doing a lot with the Sport trim now, differentiating it from the rest of the lineup. Now, as I get on the highway, what I know is that the power band is much more smooth. There's a bit more power to work with on the low end that I think is definitely going to go a long way for buyers who live in the city or in the suburbs, and you get on the highway and you have to merge on the highway every single day. You can pass slower drivers with ease. And I have to say, yes, there is some droning here. There is some rubber band effect, but it mimics gear shifts. Very impressive. Very impressive. A lot of CVTs, whether it is from Honda, Nissan, Mitsubishi, they drone. They don't feel very refined. They don't feel like you're driving a vehicle that has a traditional automatic. Subaru's been doing a lot with their CVT to address that, and this kind of feels like what we have with the Crosstrek, the Impreza, and also the Outback and Ascent. And the Forester was the last vehicle that needed this improvement, and we finally have that. What is genuinely surprising, though, for a vehicle that isn't much wider or longer than the prior generation, I feel as though I have a lot more shoulder room up front. And that really gives you this less claustrophobic feel, and you feel as though you're driving a bigger crossover than in reality. Now, a lot of that can be attributed to the panoramic moonroof, which brings in a lot of natural light. And even though it does feel a bit bigger than last generation, it hasn't lost any of that maneuverability or agility. And dare I say, I think it feels sportier than it did in the past. Also on the brakes, nice and strong. We're going to go around this rotary to see what the agility is like. Off the line, it has a nice kick to it. The last Forester I drove did not have that. And with the steering, it does feel a bit more playful and athletic. While the lack of a sports tune suspension is going to be apparent immediately, it feels very much on par to its rivals, but also it does feel pretty light on its feet. Let's talk about overall vision behind the wheel of the Forester. So you have a nice panoramic view. A-pillars are super thin, so I don't think you'll be having any blind spots when you are approaching intersections or red lights. Taking a look at your side mirrors, they do seem a bit bigger this year than the prior generation, so I can see what's in my blind spots, and like I said before, blind spot detection is optional on the Premium. Then taking a look out back, nice clear view. Even with the headrest in the way, it does seem a bit different than the last Forester, where I have much more vision there for sure. Also, one thing you don't lose for this generation is the seat positioning. You do sit pretty high up in this vehicle, although one thing I will say is that for 2025, this feels less boxy than the prior Forester. And while it's not going to have that lower roofline that you have with the Outback, this does feel more crossover and station wagon-like, and it looks like that for sure. And that's one of the reasons why I'm actually pretty excited about this model. Even though the Forester has never been the vehicle that draws my attention the most, outside the fact that it is very family friendly. Because since we don't have the 2.4, you don't get that turbo, you don't get that exhilaration and speed. But I have a feeling that Subaru has some developments in store for this model moving forward, especially with the hybrid trim. That will go a very long way. Hopefully we see that within the next few years. I think the hybrid alone is going to be a hot seller for Subaru. But it all comes back to the interior quality for me, because performance-wise, this isn't going to be making any headlines. But for the interior, and as a daily driver, and if you're commuting to work every single day, these seats are really comfortable. Also, you get the softer materials for the dashboard and trim pieces that makes this feel a lot more premium than it did in the past. When you factor in the all-new looks, the redesign for the interior, and the mechanical components that are now revitalized and retuned, what you have here is a fantastic vehicle under $35,000 for the premium. I also can't wait to experience the touring with the ultra suede trim seats. We're now getting into a territory that Subaru has never really journeyed out to with this vehicle. The Outback has always been the entry-level luxury model, especially on the higher end with the Napa leather materials. But now with the Forester, I feel as though this is going to be a great vehicle that goes head-to-head with the CR-V, with the Toyota RAV4, with other models in this price range, and I think it's now more compelling than ever. You also get that new technology. The fact you have the 11.6-inch touchscreen. On the higher end, you get the digital rear view mirror, the top view camera. These are all minor things that will go a long way, especially for buyers who are looking at purchasing a vehicle under $40,000. And after this quick test drive, I'm genuinely impressed here, because the Forester hasn't always been my favorite vehicle in the lineup, mostly because it really is all about the intangibles with the interior space, the practicality, the family friendliness, and also, of course, the pricing. This time around, there's a lot more to work with. It feels more substantial. The fact that it performs so much better, it's more responsive, and you're really not losing any of the qualities that you had here with prior generations. You still get the ground clearance, you still get super symmetrical all-wheel drive. You're getting a great, fantastic package that isn't going to break the bank. So to wrap up, change is most certainly a good thing. While Subaru owners might dispute that claim, when you take a look at what the 2025 Forester is offering now, from the ground up, it's far and away better than the vehicle it replaces. While the Forester still doesn't get the 2.4-liter turbo, at under $35,000, to get a list of standard equipment that you actually want in a vehicle, such as heated seats, to have dual zone climate control, the power moonroof, these are all things that makes driving a vehicle such as this very enjoyable. Also, what Subaru has done to the platform, giving it a lot more refinement, in my mind, makes it a no-brainer. Now, for the 2025 Forester, you might want to go with the Sport or the Limited or Touring. But if you are on a stricter budget and you don't want to spend over $35,000, take a look at the Forester, because it just might be the best Subaru in the lineup now. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys next time.